Okay, in this video, we're going to model the Longhe Central Park Lakeside restaurant, designed by SUNLAY Architectural Firm. It's a mix of hospitality and sports, basically a restaurant with some interesting geometry. This is a great exercise if you're looking to practice sub-D modeling in Rhino. I made this with beginners in mind. You'll see every command I use displayed at the top of the screen, so it's easy to follow along. If you're new here, this channel is all about architecture and 3D modeling tutorials. So let's start. It has a lot of detail. For example, here we can see this type of roof structure, a supporting structure, and a panel system. Okay, now let's take a look at the floor plan. It has a kind of Y-shaped surface. So let's start from this. I'm going to maximize the top view. Okay, now what I'm going to do is create a polyline. Let's enable grid snap so we can accurately define the dimensions. I'm going to create a 10-meter polyline, select this curve, and rebuild it with a point count of 3 and degree 1. So we get a polyline with 3 control points. Now I'm going to make it sub-D friendly by typing sub-D friendly in the command panel. When I extrude this geometry, it will generate a sub-D result. If you select it, you'll notice over here that a sub-D geometry has been added to the selection. I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, select the corners, and move it by 5 meters. Again, hold down Control and Shift, select this edge, extrude it to around 26 meters, and scale it along the Y-axis using gimbal scaling until it becomes flat. Okay, I'm going to select this side, extrude it by 5 meters, then select the corner and move it up by 5 meters. Okay, now I'm going to select this side and also this side and extrude them to the left by around 30 meters. Then I'll scale them along the X-axis until they become flat. Now before we continue, let me show you some useful shortcuts you can assign in Rhino. These will help you model much faster when working with sub-D. I'm going to type Options and go over to the keyboard section. Here, you'll see a list of all the current shortcuts. We're going to add 5 custom ones. Bevel, extrude sub-D, fill, stitch, insert edge, and insert point. Let's say we want to create a new one. I'll click New and press Ctrl+B as the shortcut. If that combination is empty, just press OK. But in my case, it's already assigned to something, so I'll click Edit Existing. Now in the command field, I'll type Bevel. You'll see the rest of the shortcuts I'm assigning appear on screen. Just follow the same method for each one. We'll also see some of them in action shortly. Once you're done typing the command, press Apply to save it. Okay, now we have a slight inclination in the reference image. Let's make this inclination. I'm going to select this part of the geometry and try rotating it, but you'll notice it messes up the form. So we need to add some holding edges between these areas. What I'm going to do is press Ctrl+K, which is the insert point command. I'll insert points right here, here, and here. Then I'll select the new edge and scale it along the X-axis to 0. Now I'm going to select this face. We can rotate it without a problem now. I'll set the center of rotation and the target point, then rotate it by around 16 degrees. Okay, now we have the base form. But in the middle, we've created an extra polygon that I want to eliminate so the form blends naturally. I'm going to select this face, type, move, and move it in the opposite direction. I'll press Tab to lock the direction and move it until it becomes straight. I'll repeat the same move in this direction so it aligns with the previous one. Then I'm going to move this corner upward to bring it closer and also move this one downward. So now we've created this temporary holding edges and we're done with it, so we don't need it anymore. Now if you press Tab on your keyboard, you'll notice that some parts are trimmed to be smooth while others are creased. I'm going to select everything and type Remove Crease. This will remove all the creases. Now I'm going to select only the corner points, select this one, and then apply crease. When you press Tab again, you'll see a smooth blending between the shapes. It creates a nice Y-shaped result. Let's switch to the perspective view. The idea here is to create a roof-like structure. We're going to move this corner point upward, but you'll notice the form is bulging too much. We need to create some holding edges. So I'll select the edges along the curved side and press Ctrl+R. That's the insert edge command. Then I'll set the insert edge offset mode to proportional. I'll zoom in here and add some subtle gables to help support the shape. Now I'll switch to the perspective view, select the corner points, and move them upward. You'll see now that the form holds properly. Let's move it by about 6 meters. I'll type 6 and press Enter. To sharpen the edge, I'm going to select the new hold edges, hold down Ctrl and Shift, double click on the edge loop to select it, and type crease. Now we're good. If you switch to rendered view, it looks fine, but the form is still bulging too much. The curve feels a bit too soft. We need to add some controlled edges to better define the bevel radius, something like a filler control. So I'm going to hold down Ctrl and select all the corner edges. Then I'll press Ctrl+R to insert edges. This time, instead of setting the mode to proportional, I'm going to switch it to absolute, so it stays aligned with the existing edges. Now we can clearly control the fillet effect more precisely. At this point, we've finished the base roof design. I'm going to move it upwards, let's say by around 4 meters, assuming that will be the building height. Now I'm going to create a new layer, backup. I'll copy this object to that layer and hide it for now. Let's add the border edges to this sub D. I'm going to select all the outer edges at once. From the top view, I'll hold down Ctrl and drag to unselect this parts. Now I'll switch back to the perspective view and extrude them downward. Let's set the extrusion height to -1.5 meters. Okay, now we've got this part done. This result works for me. Okay, I'm going to select this sub D and give it some thickness. I'll type offset sub D, and if needed, use flip all to reverse the direction. Let's set the thickness to around 0.4 meters and press Enter. Now, the roof is complete. I'm going to create a new layer and name it Roof. Then assign this object to that layer so we can manage it easily. Next, on this sub D surface, we're going to create our supporting structure, vertical elements. We'll extract using edge loops. I'll select the sub D and use the split command. Under options, I'll choose split edge at each loop, then select the hard edges we created earlier. This splits the object into 4 separate sub D surfaces we can manipulate individually. I'll now select everything and type subdivide, pressing Enter twice to subdivide it 2 more times. This gives us evenly spaced edges to work with for the structure. Now, I'll go to the Sub D Tools tab and use the Edge Ring selection. I'll double click here to select all the parallel edge rings. Press Enter, then I'll type Dup Edge, select the curves using Cell Last, and isolate them. Looking at the result, we have too many control points. This adds unnecessary polygons and makes things harder to control later. So I'll select everything and type Rebuild, setting the point count to 2 and degree to 1. With these selected, I'll run Make Sub D Friendly, then group them for easier selection later. I'll now run Unisolate to return to the full scene. I'll isolate the middle sub D again, go to the Edge Ring tool, and double click to select parallel edges. Then I'll type duplicate edges, isolate them, rebuild using point, count 2, and degree 1, and hit Enter. Now I'll apply Make Sub D Friendly, Unisolate, select the curves using Cell CRV, and create a new layer to organize them. Let's name it Structure, right-click to change the object layer, and finally hide our backup layer. Now, I'm going to extrude these curves downward to create our structural form. I'll use cell curve to select the curves and extrude them down. Then I'll release and extrude once more. Now, I'll select the original curves and delete them. Here, you'll notice that this 3 sub-D intersections can create manifold edges later. So I'm going to hide this part for now. I'll select these edges and move them slightly to the side to create a small gap. Then I'll unhide the previous part. This reveals the separation we just made. Now I'll select everything and join the sub-D together. On this side, we need to add one more edges to help support the structural shape. I'm going to select all the edges along the corners. So I'll go to the sub-D Tools tab and select sub-D Edge Brushes, then set the selection filter to Edges. In the options, I'll turn real-time selection off, enable Select Through Object, set the radius to 60, and change the selection mode from Crossing to Window. Now everything within this region will be selected. I'll drag over the area to capture those boundary edges. Back in the perspective view, you'll see that all boundary edges are now selected. I'll press Ctrl plus R to insert holding edges along those boundaries. Next, we're going to delete the middle faces so that only the boundary surfaces remain. I'll switch to the top view, then go to Set View to Bottom. Now I'll return to the Sub-D Tools section and select the Sub-D Selection Brush command. This time, I'll enable Face Selection Filters. Set Real-Time Selection to Yes, change the selection mode from Window to Crossing, and make sure Select Source Object is set to No. Now we can see that I'm having trouble selecting the faces. So I'm going to switch the display mode to wireframe so I can easily select through to the bottom faces. Once you've finished selecting, press Enter. Now, when you go back to the perspective view, you'll see those faces are selected. Once they are, I'll press Delete. After that, if you try to select anything, it won't work because the Sub-D selection filter is still active. I'll go ahead and set the selection filter to None. Now I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, select everything, and type Crease. This will keep all the edges hard. Let's switch to the front view. I'll hold down Control and Shift, select the base vertex, use Set PT, uncheck X and Y, then type 0, and press Enter to align it vertically. Now we can see our supporting structure clearly. I'll select everything, type Offset Sub-D, and set the distance to around 0.1 meters. I'll enable both sides, Yes, and also make sure Sub-D solid, Yes. Then press Enter. We now have our structure. Let's unhide the roof structure. Now both the structure and roof are visible. For the next part, we're going to model the curtain panel system. First, I'll move this section inward. You can simply move it in. I'll repeat the same move on the remaining two sides. Now that's done, let's move on to the curtain panel setup. I'm going to select one of the structural parts and isolate it. On this object, we'll start building the panel system. Let's switch to the top view. I'll go to Set View to Top. To make sure this is a flat structure, I'll select one side and scale along the Y-axis to 0. This makes sure it's flat. I'll apply the same operation to the other side. Now, I'll select this edge, and another one. Then run the Dupe Edge command. I'll isolate the result by typing Isolate. On this object, I'll select both side curves and rebuild them. While rebuilding, I'll check the number of divisions. We can see we have 8 faces. That means we need 5 control points on one side and 5 on the other. So I'll rebuild it using 5 control points and degree 1. Okay. Now I'm going to select everything and run Make Sub-D Friendly. This way, when we extrude them, it gives us a clean Sub-D result. Select the curves and join them. Now I'll isolate the object again, select the corner points and press Ctrl plus M to stitch them. Then I'll move it a little bit upward to keep the parallel alignment. Next, I'll select this edge, and double click the middle edge to select the full loop. Once all edges are selected, I'm going to extrude them downward. I'll use Set PT, type 0, and press enter to flatten them in Z. Now on this sub D, let's give it some thickness. I'll select all edges and extrude them from the top view. At this point, we're going to create all the subdivision panels on this surface. I'll select this and press Ctrl+K to insert a point. Sometimes the first and last insert points automatically create an edge in between, but for some reason it failed here. So I'm going to manually insert a point in the middle. Don't worry if the inserted edge isn't perfectly straight. Once the points are inserted, switch to wireframe mode, select the new vertices, use Set PT, make sure alignment is enabled in Z direction, and snap them to one of the straight reference points. I'll apply the same process to all the new vertices to make sure everything remains aligned and straight. Okay, next we're going to create the frame details. I'm going to select all the faces by selecting the first one, the last one, and double clicking in the middle to get the full loop. Once all faces are selected, I'll type Inset. In the options, I'll set the mode to single and the distance to 0.03. While the faces are still selected, I'll use Extrude sub D and set the extrusion to 0.03 as well. This command automatically deselects the faces, so to reselect them, I'll type cell previos, then I'll run inset again and set the distance to 0.02. I'll extrude one more time, around 0.02. Now we have our base frame structure. Let's mirror it to the other side using the reflect command. I'll select the first point and then the second point. If you want to flip the direction, you can use the flip option, but I'll keep it as it is. If you see any red sub D surfaces, don't worry, that's just Rhino showing the mirrored region points. Now I'm going to select all the faces that will become our glass panels. With those selected, I'll press Ctrl+C to make a copy, then extrude them inward to create a void. After that, I'll press Ctrl+V to paste them back and apply thickness using Offsets RF on the newly pasted objects. I'll set the thickness to 0.02. Now I'll remove the reflection by running the reflect command and choosing remove symmetry. We now have our final geometry, but the width looks too thick. So I'll switch to top view, select one side, and move it inward slightly to reduce the overall thickness. Okay, now we've finished building our base framing structure. The next step is to create the door structure. I'll go to the front view, then open the Sub D Tools section. Inside the Sub D Tools, I'll set the selection filter to edges and begin selecting the edges I want to modify. I'll select a few edges, then use the gumball to scale them by dragging the gimbal handles. Now I'll apply the same adjustment to the center vertical edge, scaling it along the x-axis to maintain proportion. Next, I'll select everything and group it so we can easily select the door structure later. If you press Tab on your keyboard, you might notice a blobby or circular sub D appearance. This is normal. It's due to the smoothing behavior of sub D geometry. I'll select everything and run Extract Control Polygon, which converts our sub D into a mesh. Then I'll use ToNurbs to convert that mesh into NURBS geometry. After that, I'll run Merge or Coplanar Faces to clean up the surface and convert it into a proper closed poly surface. Now I'll select the original sub D and move it back into the backup layer. The result gives us a clean closed poly surface. I'll group everything again to keep it organized. Next, I'll unhide the other layers in the scene to bring everything back. Now we'll copy and place this paneling system onto other parts using the orient command. I'll enable copy to yes and scale to 3D. Then I'll pick the base point, the second reference point, and place it onto the target points. I'll repeat the same process for the opposite side as well. That's it for this tutorial. Here's a quick render I made using the model we built so far. If you enjoyed it, give the video a thumbs up, it really helps and lets us know you'd like to see more modeling series like this. I'll also add this to a YouTube playlist right here, so you'll find similar tutorials all in one place. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.